Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling have both been named in a criminal lawsuit filed in France by the Algerian Olympic boxer Imane Khelif, who recently won gold. So if you'd like a truthful and honest appraisal of what's going on here, please consider subscribing my channel as a fresh alternative to the mainstream media, like the video and ring that notification bell so you don't miss further videos. And with that, please stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. So let's get into what's going on here. So first of all, a broad overview. This complaint has been filed against X, the platform, meaning the parties are as yet unknown, but reportedly it has named Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling as two within it that have allegedly been involved in what they claim is aggravated cyberbullying, both of which I'll come back to in a moment. Now, reportedly, they say that anyone involved could stand trial, but as I say, I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's come back to what really the complaint is all about, because no doubt anyone that's been on social media in the last month and watched any of the Olympics has been aware of this dispute and this controversy over this Algerian boxer, Imane Khelif. Now, there's been lots of to and fro over what the problem was regarding gender. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate as such, but I will explain broadly what's going on here. Now, one criticism that I do have, and I'm happy to share, is about the way that the International Olympic Committee, hereafter the IOC, has decided how to categorize people within this competition. Now, this is not, I stress, me jumping on any bandwagon and mislabeling, misgendering, or harassing anybody in any way of the sort, but I am going to give a thought as to what I think about how that categorization has taken place. And I'll give you more of my thoughts on that in Black Belt Secrets, my other channel, linked in the description below. And while you're down there, subscribe to my money channel, as I call it, Daniel Shensmith, as well. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But very broadly speaking, there's this whole dispute between the IOC and the International Boxing Association. So this controversy all really came about with the gender test results ahead of the 2023 World Boxing Championships, which was sanctioned by the International Boxing Association, the IBA. So the WBC and the IBA hereafter. So apparently the IBA carried out these tests and said that the boxer had XY chromosomes, which are ordinarily associated with males. Now, this is where the controversy all started. So let's get back to the absolute basics and fundamentals here. Everybody knows that ordinarily those born of female sex are XX chromosomes, and those that are born male are XY chromosomes. But because human genetics does not always work perfectly, now I don't profess to be an expert here, there are various syndromes which mean individuals might be born with female reproductive organs but also have X and Y chromosomes present. Swyer syndrome is one such thing. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly because I'm not a doctor. However, certain individuals have these kind of conditions. And just to be clear, from what I read, it's not been verified that this boxer has any recognized syndrome of this sort. However, this is where the controversy began. But reportedly, the IBA said that their tests revealed that this boxer had XY chromosomes. They say that the athlete did not undergo a testosterone examination but was subject to a separate and recognized test whereby the specifics remain confidential. The IBA president said, "We got the test results that they allowed us to take themselves, and these tests showed that they had a high level of testosterone like a man." Through a translator, he said, "a man's level of testosterone." Now, it's worth saying at this point that the IBA was banned from the Olympics because of its political connections. And following all of this, the IOC defended the boxer's eligibility for the competition before the Olympics and said every person has the right to practice sport without discrimination. Now, that, of course, is a true statement. How that is implemented is entirely another matter. Many of you will have subjective views on that, and I have just one comment that I'll make on that in a moment, which is not particularly controversial. But the IOC went on to say that two athletes were the victims of sudden and arbitrary decision by the IBA. They are referring, of course, to Yu Ting, the other boxer that was amid this controversy. And the IOC argued that they were suddenly disqualified without any due process. Now, some people, I'm sure, will dispute that and say that the World Boxing Championships disqualified two boxers that failed the gender eligibility test, despite the IBA that sanctioned those tests being disqualified from the Olympics. But the IOC went went on to say Imane was born female, registered female, lived life as female, boxed as a female, and has a female passport. Mark Adams of the IOC said this is not a transgender case. Now, this goes back to the genetics that I mentioned before, but although it's not confirmed whether or not there's any particular syndrome at play here, just that the IOC said this is not a transgender case. Mark Adams continued to say that many women can have testosterone levels which will be called male levels, and can still be women and compete as women. Says that the idea that you do one test for testosterone and that sorts everything out, not the case, I'm afraid. And then in a joint public statement by the IOC read as follows: every person has the right to practice sport without discrimination. All athletes participating in the boxing tournament of the Olympic Games Paris 2024 comply with the competition's eligibility and entry regulations, as well as all applicable medical regulations set by the Paris 2024 boxing unit. As with previous Olympic boxing competitions, the gender and age of the athletes are based on their passport. These rules also applied during the qualification period, including the boxing tournaments of the 2023 European Games, Asian Games, Pan American Games and Pacific Games, the ad hoc 2023 African qualifying tournament in Dakar, and 2 world qualifying tournaments held in Busto, etc., etc., etc. But the one bit that I might urge you to think about here is where they say, as with previous Olympic boxing competitions, the gender and age of the athletes are based on their passport. But this is where, for me, as a lawyer, the whole argument descends into chaos, and there cannot be, as they've said, one single answer to all of this. No simple answer, they've separately been quoted to say. Now, on the one hand, they say in this statement that, as with previous competitions, the gender and age of the athletes are based on their passport, i.e. it's entirely straightforward, we take their sex based on their passport and that's it, nothing more to talk about. But that argument works both ways, because if there is something else, such as XY chromosomes, such as higher levels of testosterone, now I don't profess to be an expert in any of those things and genetics and whatever, that is best left to scientists and biologists and anyone else that can have any meaningful contribution to this conversation as to whether or not those things really do play a significant part vis-a-vis male, female competitions, etc. All I can say is that the law does permit discrimination if it's for a legitimate aim. For example, taking this outside of the realm of the Olympics for a moment, and I promise you I'll come back to the lawsuit filed in a moment, but if we take a generic competition, taking it outside of the realms of the Olympics and so on, ordinarily, if you have a competition with a men's category and a women's category, and you have a transgender woman who remains biologically male, it would be legitimate to exclude trans women from the women's category because it is trying to achieve a fair and legitimate aim. Because the officials of the competition might be seeking to address a fairness in the categories and therefore exclude trans women from the female category because it would be unfair to everyone else in that category. That is not me espousing any views and criticism to anybody here, and certainly not to the trans community, but this is a legal fact. It is permitted, certainly within England and Wales, it is permitted within the Equality Act 2010 to have a discrimination if it's to achieve a fair and legitimate purpose. It must be proportionate, it must be fair, it must seek to address a proportionate, legitimate aim, but it can do something which would otherwise be discriminatory if it's trying to achieve that aim. Let me give you an example. If a company is trying to improve the diversity ratios of its staff, its employees, it may advertise to a particular group of society for recruitment. And if it specifies and targets that group as against another group, some people might think on the face of it that that's discriminatory against the groups that they are not inviting to apply for those roles. However, because they are seeking to address a legitimate misrepresentation or to improve those ratios within their workforce, they are permitted to advertise for those roles to particular groups to improve those ratios. That is permitted under the Equality Act. Similarly, when we're looking at a competition, particularly contact sports, if the organisers of that competition wanted to make it fairer for both men and women, they could exclude trans men or trans women from the respective categories because it is fairer for all concerned. So that is a broad overview of the legal position, but of course that spilled out onto social media as a rather heated debate of this rather divisive issue. So now back to this lawsuit, and is it really going anywhere? Now, if it names Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling, and it's a criminally filed complaint in France, now the same arguments would apply as against Elon Musk that I explained in my previous video with the assistance of attorney at law from the United States, Brian Rio, and the short answer is most probably not anything to worry about for Elon Musk, because it would have to amount to a crime in both jurisdictions, both in France and in the US. And whilst I can't speak for French law, I can't really speak for US law, save that I've been given some assistance by a US attorney, and free speech is very strongly protected in the United States. And so as a broad overview for the United States, it's my understanding that cyberbullying is not a uniformly defined offence across the United States. Where those laws do exist, they are carefully balanced against the right to free speech under the First Amendment. And as I mentioned in previous videos, for free speech to be criminalised in the US, it would have to cross the line into clear and imminent threats, direct incitement to violence, and something very narrowly refined as a genuine truth threat or obscenity or defamation with actual malice. Whereas Elon Musk's comments, and I'll caveat that I've obviously not read them all, I can't possibly know what all of those comments are, but they are likely to be expressing opinions on gender in sports. They are likely to be viewed as free speech, however unfavourable and unpleasant they might be seen by other people, and of course it's not pleasant for somebody to be upset by those things, but they are likely to be protected speech, especially given that this is a very public debate on a very public platform on a controversial issue. So drawing on my understanding from my previous videos, I think the US courts would be highly reluctant to extradite Elon Musk for cyberbullying to France over this issue. Now, broadly the same thing can be applied for the United Kingdom, although, as I've opined just recently, I think free expression, as we call it here, is less protected than free speech is protected in the United States. I still think that this is likely to fall short vis-a-vis J.K. Rowling in terms of cyberbullying in the UK. Because again, and rather ironically, it's the ECHR that protects the freedom of expression under Article 10. Now, this is a qualified right, meaning it's not absolute. You don't have the absolute right to say anything you wish, but it is strongly protected. Now, with recent events, a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't feel to be very protected at the moment with people going to prison for what they post on Facebook. Now, just to very broadly overview that, one of the reasons for that is that it is linked to the civil unrest in the UK, and because it's linked to that, they are taking a very strong stance against it. But very generally, on public debate issues, the freedom of expression is likely to be robustly protected. And thus, overall, it's unlikely, again with the caveat of not having read every comment, but it's unlikely overall that this principle of dual criminality is going to be met, and thus unlikely to reach the threshold for dual criminality to extradite J.K. Rowling to France for criminal prosecution. But of course, every case turns on its own facts, and the courts are independent to decide these things themselves, and there might be just one message that either court thinks crosses the threshold, and they might say, well, that is enough to cross the criminal threshold for dual criminality and thus warrant extradition. I just don't think that's very likely. But I hope you found that a broad, refreshing overview. If you did, please hit that subscribe button. My channel is growing thanks to all of you watching and supporting my channel. Don't forget to like the video, ring the notification bell so you get updates on all of these things. And I promise to come back and give you a frank and honest overview of all of these issues. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.